Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the Public Works Finance Committee regular meeting for Monday, April 22nd, 2019. First order of business on today's agenda is approval of the Public Works Finance Committee April 8th, 2019 minutes. Anybody see anything wrong with that?
Yeah, I've seen it. Wrong with the minutes or wrong with the proposal? No, they're fine.
Either. Okay, we'll submit those as approved then, as a consent agenda item, as usual. Item number 2 is 2019 Pavement Management Program, Slurry Seal Bid Award. Steve Schulte, Scott Bontrager. Looks like Tyler's filling in for Steve today. He's probably busy filling potholes right now.
We decided that after the week of flooding and then catching up on all the things afterward, that Stevie could take a day off, and so
Right.
I'm coming in for him. So yeah, this is the pavement management program. This is we're really happy to have it as established as it is now. It was a newer thing for the council, 8 or 9 years ago, but now this has become an annual thing through our Inland Northwest Street Maintenance Co-op. We've spread a lot of these practices now regionally. And so our this first item is the slurry seal, and so this is part of our pavement management program package for this summer. Just to reiterate, our goal with this program is to keep our good pavements good. For a long time in street maintenance, the people would chase their tail. You'd fix your worst pavements, and then you'd never catch up because your good pavements would then become bad pavements. And so it really was the equivalent of skipping the oil change on the new vehicle to save up to change out the motor on the old one, and you never catch up. And so the smart way is to try and keep them good. We've had quite a bit of success. We pioneered a lot of processes here in the area, and this slurry seal is one that we brought the first slurry seal to the Inland Northwest back in 2011, and now we have Lewiston, who routinely every year puts them out. We put them out every year, and we've got this year for the first time the University of Idaho and Washington State University plan to put out bids on the heels of our bid in hopes that the contract will then come and do some work for them. So that's pretty exciting. We actually have our co-op meeting this Thursday to discuss further coordination. The whole region is using our specification, the specification based on our spec that we wrote, and so that's been a very successful program for us, and that's what the slurry seal is. So the slurry seal is our most basic treatment. It's a surface treatment. It's a thin surface treatment, and so the goal of that is to keep the pavement flexible, keep cracks from getting water in them, and to give a wearing surface on the surface of the street. So it really is intended for good pavements is what a slurry seal is intended for. We've had an increase every year that we've put this out in the number of responsive bidder, or in the number of people who take bid packages. There's now several companies that are interested in our programs because we are putting out enough quantity with the others in the region. And so we were happy to see how the bid results came in, and Scott will just review that portion with you.
Yeah, just a quick, might as well give you a little bit overview of the locations that we're planning on doing this year. So this is an overall map of the city. Some of these places, we're going to do Brent Drive up here, and then some of these neighborhoods more on the southeast portions of town.
Something that we're actually pretty excited about is, so like for example, this area, it's largely a second application. And so our goal after we get new pavement down is to have once every 7 years we do this, and it really prolongs that pavement life. You can turn what's a 20-25 year design life, and we can stretch it into 40 years. And when you start looking at the dollars, for something like a slurry seal, every dollar we spend on the front end, we save $7 on the back end. So it's really it's encouraging to us to be getting to the point where we're circling back on some of those earlier treated roads. And it's also been encouraging to see the longevity that we've seen in these areas, that they have held up well in our climate and with our plowing, and so that's been encouraging. So this is an area that we're circling back on.
Yeah, I believe this area was either 2011 or 2013.
Yeah, I think that was 11.
Yeah. Up in the Indian Hills area. And then this is circling back to, we had also hit this area back in 2011 or 2013.
Yeah. So we had our bidder, I guess you can run through the bid
Sure.
doc stuff.
Yeah, we'd put this out to bid back in late March. We had 5 large firms looking at it, but only 2 actually put in bids for it. This year we'd received bids and opened them on April 16th. We'd received 2 bids, one from Blackline of Vancouver, Washington for $252,655, and then one from Intermountain Slurry Seal, who is done all of our projects in the past, but this year they gave us a bid of $361,192, which of the two bids, the low bid that we're recommending is the one from Black Line, Vancouver, Washington at $252,655, which this year they gave us a price of roughly $1.69 a square yard, which in the history we've seen since 2011 it climb from $1.44 a square yard up to $1.67 a square yard. So this year it wasn't much higher, only a couple cents more a square yard.
So yeah, the cost staying low with some of the other costs we've seen in the construction industry has been pretty encouraging through this process. And they're a reputable company. They've worked a lot in the area. They also have Lewiston's. Lewiston's bid opened a few weeks ago, and Blackline was awarded Lewiston's project, and so we suspect that that's largely what drove their interest in our project and maybe not as much interest from others. One of the things that we are looking at that we're going to try for in future years is rather than just timing out or coordinating our bid releases with the other entities, actually putting out a regional bid package where we bid together is something that we're exploring in this next year to see if we might get even more competitive prices by actually lumping everyone together.
Yeah, it's something that has been suggested by these various, contract firms. With a company like this coming out of Vancouver, recently, City of Vancouver had combined theirs with Clark County and WSU Vancouver and everybody for a much larger project, and they put out a multi-million-dollar bid with this same type of company.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, with that, we were pleased where the price came in. It was lower than our engineer's estimate, and so we think that it'll be a good project, and we propose accepting that bid is what we would propose goes forward to City Council.
Just as a point of interest, when they bring the material in, do they bring it in tanker trucks, or do they bring it as close as possible by rail and have some local contractor bring the material to the job site, or how do they do that?
A little bit of both. One of the things that we like about this is it has a pretty low carbon footprint, so they locally source the aggregate. So there are two components to this. There's an emulsion and an aggregate. And so the aggregate is locally sourced, and so they will haul that here locally, and we provide a staging area. We've been at our city shop the last couple of years. And so they'll haul that in from a local rock crusher, and then the emulsion they generally are hauling in a tanker, and then the trucks that they bring, the equipment that they bring, it has a tank for the emulsion, and then it has a hopper for the aggregate, and it combines and mixes them, and then applies it to the roadway. It's like a big Zamboni almost.
So it's part of the application process. The transport vehicle is part of the application process. That's what I was kind of interested in.
Yep.
Thank you. Any questions on this?
Yeah, we
Seems-
know we have $1,095,000 that we budgeted for the pavement management program in 19.
First time we've been over $1 million in the PMP, which is awesome.
This looks like there's still more
Next
left over
agenda
after we
item
do
will take
this.
care of that.
Well, the next item,
We'll blink into that a little
don't
bit at
answer
least.
yet. You got some Ginsu knives and a bamboo steamer too. So I would say that we could go ahead and put this on a consent agenda as an item that
Certainly.
everyone's going to agree on. Item number 3 is part of the pavement management program as well, and it's the rubber chip seal, asphalt rubber chip seal program, and we got the same crew presenting here, I'm sure.
Yeah, so this is the second phase of our surface treatments that we'll do within the pavement management program. This is a more expensive treatment. This is our most, I would say it's the treatment that allows us to reach for the worst condition roads with the surface treatment. This is the most extreme surface treatment that we can do before we get into things like grinding things off and overlaying and those sorts of things. And we experimented with this process a few years ago. We learned a lot through that first. It was the first time one had been done in our region at that time. Now a lot of them are done in the Tri-Cities, Seattle and Portland area. That's really picked up. And this gives us a tool that it used to be that in our toolbox, once we got to that kind of 20-year-old pavement that was fairly cracked up, pretty oxidized, there wasn't a lot we could do with it. We called them pending rebuilds because we weren't quite ready to rebuild them yet. We weren't going to have the money to rebuild them, but there really wasn't anything we could do with it. So we just kind of threw our hands up and said, well, when it blows up kind of a thing. this was a great addition to the toolbox, and it's also a very green process. They take tires, and so it's a way to reuse tires. They don't end up getting burned or in a landfill or anything like that. They grind up asphalt or tire rubber, and they combine it into an emulsion that then is superheated, and it adds a lot of flexibility. You know, the real enemy of any roadway is moisture. And so our big goal is to keep water out of the base. And when you have an asphalt road in particular, the asphalt itself doesn't provide a whole lot of structure. It's the base underneath that provides the structure. And so our goal with this asphalt is to maintain its flexibility. So when you live in an area like we do, where you have extreme freeze and thaw cycles, that can be a real challenge. And so we put a lot of our attention into trying to keep the water out of our roads. And so when you have a road that has extensive cracking, that can be a real challenge, and it will really rapidly accelerate the degradation of the roadway surface. And so what this process does is it puts down a much thicker than normal. So a chip seal will always put down an emulsion, but with this rubber, they're able to put down a very thick emulsion that's very flexible. And so it almost becomes like a blanket, like a tarp that holds together and has a lot of flexibility in it. And then we add the chip into that. And so we put this bid out again. It's one of those where we're not putting out a ton of volume, and it still is a little bit more of a specialized process here. There are only 2 companies generally that we have that look at our bid package on this one. So we really weren't sure if we'd get a bid that was within the price range that we thought would be reasonable to move forward with the project. And we were pretty happy to receive that bid. So I'll let Scott run through that.
Yeah, this project had roughly 44,000 square yards, and I'll show some of the neighborhoods. And kind of up here, North 3rd Street, and then further on the southern part of Moscow here. So up on A Street, B Street, and up in those neighborhoods up here. And then further south down on Steiner.
Maybell.
In Maybell. So when we put this out, we had the engineer's estimate. We put this one out in late March, same as the slurry seal, got bids back April 16th. We had it estimated at $460,000, which was roughly $10.50 a square yard, which is what we were expecting. We were told by the contractors that emulsion was a lot higher this year. We were pleasantly surprised to get a bid in from Intermountain Slurry on this one for $380,569.10, which puts it at, for the square yardage we were doing, at roughly $8.07, or $8.70 a square yard, compared to in 2016, the last time we did it was $8.60 a square yard, so we're pretty much back to where we were.
Yeah, so we were pretty encouraged by that. And so the nice thing about this process is we do get into the cost where you could consider a grind and inlay on some of these roads at this cost. But the real difference is when it's a bit of a misnomer, because at that grind and inlay cost, an unmitigated crack in asphalt will generally migrate through new asphalt at about 1 inch per year. So if we just go in, grind it off, we've got cracks, and we just hit it with an overlay. If we put down 1.5 inches, 18 months later, those cracks will reflect back through. And then at those thin overlay levels, it starts popping off. I think we've all seen roads where they have those thin overlays, and once that starts to ravel, you really have a problem. Whereas with this product, since it does go down and maintain a lot better flexibility, it does a better job of sealing those cracks, and we get a longer term wearing surface and sealant from the road. And so it's a better it's definitely a better bang for our buck in that price range.
Yeah, and what we've found too with the grind and inlays that we do typically, so like last year when we did Mountain View, to do that thickness, which is usually about 2.5, 3 inches, plus using a fabric interlay between, kind of help to mitigate the cracking. That's more around the $20 a square yard range, so more than double what this is.
So the way that we would do a grind and inlay or an overlay in order to actually have the city get a worthwhile return on investment, we're closer to the $20 per square yard range. And so this is less than half the cost, and we feel like we really get the life expectancy out of it.
What sort of pre-treatment do you do on the project or on the surface before you apply this?
So this is actually less intensive pre-treatment than the slurry seal. So the slurry seal, we try and really get out and we try and fill the cracks, because the slurry is a thinner product and it won't do as well filling the cracks. Due to the thickness and the viscosity of the emulsion that is used with this process, it'll actually fill micro cracks itself. It acts like a one big crack fill. And so the rule of thumb on this one is that we will go out and fill a crack if it's larger than 1/2 inch. If it's not larger than half an inch, you let it go and you let the material fill it itself. And so that's what makes it a really great surface for some of those where we see like alligator cracking, but alligator cracking that's fatigue cracking. There's two different kinds. Either you get cracking that comes from the bottom up or the top down. So if we have a road that's still pretty structurally sound, but you have the fatigue cracking, this will go right over the top and it'll fill cracks that we really can't otherwise fill and seal. And that's the real benefit to the process. And so this is less intensive as far as pre-treatment work, but on the slurry areas, the streets department will be out, are already out, and will be out in full force doing the prep work for those areas.
Cool. I remember the picture from last time with this one, with the guy with the, like, underneath like a blanket.
Yeah, that's right.
Which was
Yep.
kind of like, I'm not crawling under there, but it sure is a graphic representation of what it does.
Yeah, it's a pretty interesting photo there showing how flexible the product actually is and remains.
So in identifying the streets that you're going to apply this to, you have like, somebody goes around and drives all the streets, right? You have like a Google Earth kind of car that assesses the pavement condition of all the streets, and then you like pull them out, like prioritize them, do a triage kind of thing, and then figure it out from that?
Yeah, we call it an OCI, an overall condition index, and once every 3 years, we have a company that comes out and drives the streets for us. Before, the old school way of doing it was they call it the windshield survey, but the windshield survey was just, it was absolutely dependent on who was driving and what mood they were in that day, and what car they were in and what time of day they drove it and was it raining or not, so you could see the cracks. All that kind of stuff played into it, and the technology's gotten really good to where we had this done. We've done it a second time now, and we were able to refine it according to our parameters. And then what we can do is we take those OCI ratings, and we know what range of ratings each treatment might be good for. And so we'll say, okay, for the slurry seal, we're targeting everything with an OCI of 92 and above, and it's a 0 to 100 scale. And then for something like this, we say, okay, let's look at everything from a 65 to an 85 and see what falls within that range. And then that's when the expertise of our staff comes in. That's when their training comes into play, because the programming helps us narrow down the ranges. But then our staff will go out, Scott, Steve, they'll go out and they'll do a field analysis and say, okay, is this the right candidate? Because a lot of times there are things that we have to take into consideration. How shaded is the road? Is there a lot of turning traffic? Or is there a lot of trucks on this? All of those things can impact the success of a specific treatment. And so that's really where the staff expertise comes in. So we use the software to narrow it down, and then the staff to actually make the selections. Software's kind of the machete and the staff's the scalpel, and we get the thing figured out.
So of the ones that might have been identified for this treatment, how many of them do you have to like say, man, we don't really have the budget for those? How many do you have to put off?
Well, so what our ideal amount right now to stay on our rotation for the pavement management program is $1.4 million. That's how much we would like to be putting into keeping up on our roads. And so we're a little shy of that. So there are definitely a lot of roads that if we had unlimited funds, we'd be out there doing a lot of things with. But with this particular treatment, there is a narrower range of roads that we can use this on. And so, I'm sure we could come up with this size of a package again in a subsequent year, about this size. But you do run out of candidates at some point for certain treatments, and so then you gotta.
We do have this programmed out too. When Steve and I had looked at this, we do have mapped out areas for the next few years identified. This was just the portion of it that we could do this
So
year.
in our planning, we try to have a pretty good 3-year plan that we've got laid out so we know where we're going.
So these two projects munch through 630-something thousand of the million. So the rest of it goes into things like potholes and some of the more disreputable streets.
There's generally within that an extensive patching program wherever, like a lot of time, what we try and leave is some flexibility, because winter to winter, you have some ideas, but sometimes the road will surprise you and you'll really have a blow up. And then pieces of this will also go to fund street portions of projects that we're doing, like rebuild projects that are happening on other streets. So for example, we've got Lily Street that's in design right now. That'll be a complete resurfacing. Water and sewer will pick up some of that for the trench over their utilities, but then the streets needs to pick up the rest of it. We've got, Almond Street and the Hopper, several of these. And so then that money will get programmed toward the streets portion of those types of projects.
Cool, man. Anything you want to inquire about? I think we can put this in the same bucket with the other one. It's a no-brainer. We should do this. And
Yes, please.
Great, thank you.
thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Item number 4 is the Fire Station number 2 re-roof bid results. David Schott's going to tell us what's going on there, and hopefully it'll be as successful as the 1912 roof.
I think metal roofs in a hailstorm, fine stuff.
Good afternoon, thank you. So this is the Fire Station number 2 re-roof project, the bid results for that. Parks and Rec Department is requesting authorization to retain Renegade Northwest Incorporated for the Fire Station 2 re-roofing project in the amount of $62,050 with a 5% contingency of a little over $3,100 for a total amount not to exceed $65,152.50. In addition, we're also requesting to overrun capital project buildings, public safety, in the amount of $3,720.20 to cover the total project expenses, and I'll get into that later in the presentation. So a little background, the roof at Fire Station 2 is in really rough shape over the past few years. Facilities have patched numerous leaks. The roof's a little over 3,400 square feet. This project includes the Armor Light Roofing System by the Garland Company. The Armor Light Roofing System is a robust metal roof, sealed seam with a 30-year warranty. This Armor Light roof has been installed on the 1912 Center, and I'm pleased to report that during all the torrential rains we've had recently, we didn't have any leaks. So
Even the skylights.
even the skylights, so that was a good thing. ITC, numerous other buildings, the USI campus and the Moscow School District. Bids were open on April 4th. We got 3 responsive bid proposals. They ranged from $62,050 to $77,236. Renegade Northwest was the low bidder at the $62,050. Renegade was the contractor that installed the 1912 roof. The general was Darden, but Renegade was the actual roofing company that did the roof. So they did a nice job. The funding source is capital projects, buildings, public safety. However, we are anticipating a budget shortfall in the amount of $37.20 to complete the project. If the low bid is accepted, the total project cost is anticipated to be $73,620 and some change. I broke down the project cost just so everyone could see it. Chick Mabbitt with Associate Architects, who also did the 1912 roof, his expenses are $76.60. We had some advertising expense. The low bid at $62,050. A construction contingency of 5%, and then a commitment to arts at 1%. So we had in the budget $69,900, and we're estimating the project to be the $73.6. So our recommendation is to move forward with Renegade for the Fire Station 2 re-roof project with the low bid and a 5% contingency. And with that, I'd be happy to take any questions from committee.
Well, I think it's another one that we pretty much have to do, and we have experience with the firm, and they've done good work before, so I feel pretty good about the whole thing. Anybody?
And if you don't fix it, the cost of fixing the insides after the water gets in is going to be greater than what this is.
Right.
So this is a surprisingly easy Public Works and Finance Committee meeting.
Anything to add, Ann? You in favor?
Yes.
Okay, then we'll do the same thing with this we did with the other two then.
Thank you.
Thank you, David. Then we're moving on to the report section of today's meeting. We had a C and Main
We have one
public
more
art.
item.
Oh, I do have one more item.
Yeah.
Oh, yes, the water and sewer rate contract, yeah.
Okay. What you have before you is a contract for water and sewer rate study. This is something that we've anticipated for the last couple of years. There are some things that have prevented it moving forward. One of those is our long-term capital improvement plan. We're closing in on that. We are running out of time a little bit. The 2013 rate study that was conducted, obviously in 2013, was water, sewer, sanitation. And the firm that we would like to move forward with it is FCS Group. FCS did the 2013 study, also did the standalone sanitation study that was done about a year and a half ago. So, which set the rates that we're moving forward in that fund. This is something that we try to do every 5 to 6 years. In 2013, we are in the FY 2020 budget will be the last year that rates were contemplated under that study. The process, if you've read the document as well as the scope of services, there are a couple things that are going on. One is to actually look at the rates, how they are compared to our capital plan, operational plan, takes into account water and sewer comp plans. We will also be moving forward within the next year or so with revisions to those comp plans as well. We're a little bit out of sync on those. It'd be nice to have the comp plan fully done and ready to go, then you do your rate study. But again, as I said, with things being as they are, we were not prepared to move forward, but we are running out of time on this study. We anticipate that the comp plans will adjust somewhat. There will be some projects which we will go through the comp plan, and as we're moving through the rate study, we'll note which projects under the comp plan have been completed, and then any changes that we see going forward. It just will not have the comprehensive update that we had hoped to have by this time. FCS has a lot of experience in this regard. There are two other things that we're having them look at. One is the way that we bill for sewer services. We have some, what we believe are inconsistencies in the system about how individual businesses versus multi-tenant facilities are being segregated out and billed a certain rate. Not so much the rate. Commercial rate is commercial rate based upon the loading that the business has. For instance, restaurants have a different load factor and a different rate than, say, an office. At any rate, we want to make sure that there is equity across the system. So they will be looking at that. That's the first time that we've tried to break that down. Secondly, we're taking a look at our facilities charges. And the reason for that is there was a case out of Hayden Lake, North Idaho Contractors Association versus City of Hayden, which looked at facilities charges and how those should be calculated. So we're taking a look at our facilities charges, making sure that we meet with the guidelines that the Supreme Court handed down in that case. So we're getting quite a bit of work done for the contract. In this case, we'd like to move forward. If we get consensus of this group to move forward, then we intend on moving a little quicker than we had hoped. I shouldn't say quicker than we had hoped. Fairly quickly, because this is a month with 5 Mondays. There won't be a chance to get this in front of City Council till May 6th. We would like to get Angie Sanchez, who's been our liaison for the last 2 rate studies, to come down, and we will start scoping this as early as next week if we can schedule that out. The idea is to get participants from operations, capital, finance, the utility billing department, so on and so forth, to sit down and do a much more comprehensive look on this. We anticipate reconvening the rate study committee, which we've had for all of our rate studies. We bring citizens in, and they essentially, the consultant takes the data that the city generates, analyzes it, proposes different approaches, and then comes into the rate study committee and rolls those ideas out before them, get citizen concerns, so on and so forth. So we will likely be moving ahead on this very quickly if we get consensus out of this committee. As I indicated, our rates under the 2013 study are good through FY 2020. In order to have new rates in place for implementation in the FY 2021 budget, we will need to do that, have it ready to go by the end of 2019. If we get started now, the contract says that they will be done before January 1st, and that's pretty critical for us implementing those changes in the FY 2021 budget. So might have any and funding was anticipated $50,000 in the sewer fund, $50,000 in the water fund. Professional services line items. So we are ready to go as soon as we get the consensus and the approval of City Council.
As far as the rate study, I've heard from several smaller businesses downtown that are, sandwich shop kind of things, and that because they're considered a restaurant, they're paying the same as someone who has 3 French fryers, and that they don't put the same load on the system, and maybe we could come up with a way to tier that system that has to do with the load that those people put on. So if that could be included, that'd be great.
Yeah, we will look at equity across the system. Of course, our FOG program has allowed us to shed some light on that as well. So again, equity across the system is what we're after.
Yeah, I'm sure the fog people know which pipe the fog is coming out of, or pretty close, and so they can identify whether certain things are a problem or not.
I think it makes sense to, one, retain the same firm because it's not starting from zero. They've already got experience with us and what we're after. And so that helps rather than starting from nothing. And also, I was impressed with the size of the scope of work that we're asking for, and relative to the cost, it would seem we're getting a lot for what we're paying for this one.
Yeah, it seems pretty reasonably priced for what.
Yeah, so the scope of work went on and on and on. It's a lot.
And we determine the scope of work based on the 2013 scope plus additional services that we wanted done. So we also believe that it's a pretty good body of work for the price.
Yeah, I think it gives us the tools we need to price things appropriately, to pay for future maintenance and repair for things, and gives us a justification for what we're charging for those services. So I think
And
it's
keeps us out of trouble with the EPA and others.
Yeah, exactly.
I was going to ask, so you mentioned Hayden. Are we expecting to have to make any changes based on the Supreme Court decision?
Well, we'll know after we fully analyze it, but we're prepared to look at what we've got, how we do it, compare it to that. City attorneys looked at it. This firm actually was quite involved with the firm, Holly Troxel, I believe, was the legal firm that dealt with that as well. So we expect to get some of their experience on this.
Okay.
Okay, I think we should recommend approval of the agreement and advance that to the
Consent as well?
agenda. Yeah.
Okay,
Get cracking in the meanwhile.
will do. Thank you. Now we are.
Now we're on reports. The Sea and Main Public Art budget recommendation. Megan Cherry's going to tell us what's being proposed for that location, which is kind of blank right now.
As blank as the screen.
That is too. It looks just like that. Only with more mud on it.
This is where we need you to hum the Jeopardy song.
Yeah.
Tech part figured out. Hi, thank you for having me today. I'm excited to tell you about what's happening with the Sea and Main Public Art Project. This is a project, as all of you know, this has been on the docket for a while. It's part of the Public Art Master Plan that was written in 2015, and so this is the next one on the list. What you see here is the project description as it reads exactly as it'll go to the artists soon, hopefully here in the beginning of May. And the Arts Commission and city staff have taken a little bit of an extended timeline in developing this RFQ for this site for a couple of reasons. One, I was new here at the city, and so it was it made sense to take a little bit more time to develop this project, and so that development happened between December and March of this year. And so we're actually looking at extending the timeline. Which button do I push?
Or to proceed,
Yeah,
that one.
that one. Okay. Yeah, my first 6 months is basically, which button do I push? Okay. And so this is the timeline that we're looking at now, which ultimately lands us with an artwork installation about a year from now. And so we've got a community information session coming up on April 29th. We are recommending a budget increase, which maybe I've got that on there in error. I'm not sure if that needs to go to council. And we are also incorporating the use of an online call for entry system with this call, which will allow us to spread the call online as opposed to and using their listing service. And that will streamline our submission process. Then we'll have a couple of rounds of selection, including public input, and then the artist has time to do their work, and hopefully we'll look at artwork installation in May of 2020. The Public Art Master Plan does call for one major public art installation per year, and I think that had this project going in this year, so we delayed for a variety of reasons. Also, as we approach each project, we're wanting to consider timing that's appropriate both to what's in the Public Works 1% budget for the arts and also the project at hand. So maybe relaxing that one project per year for the sake of quality and project budget alignment with market values. So budget. This is a budget analysis that we developed based on similar projects from the region. And public art projects are difficult to analyze in this way, but ultimately we chose a simple square footage analysis based on what based on the RFQ document for each of these projects. So essentially the RFQ is asking for the artist to create a piece to occupy a certain size of artwork area. And so given that number plus the project budget, it's easy enough to calculate the square footage that we're dealing with, or the price per square foot. So we analyzed some projects from the region. As you can see, some of these are, in cities that have, much higher public art budgets. That small roundabout in Coeur d'Alene, really it is the tiniest roundabout that I've ever seen. And I think because of the size of that space, and their budgets, that's where they landed on that. But ultimately, we wanted to find ourselves a little bit closer to, the middle of the market. And the reason for that is that artists have a lot of opportunities when they're looking for work, and particularly public artists have lots to pick from when they're looking online for calls for entry. And so it would be great to see our public art budget creation starting to be driven by this kind of market analysis. So that's a piece of it. The other part of it is that we're requiring, for the first time in Moscow's public art projects, to my understanding, the engineered drawings have never been an element of the artist requirements, and we're adding that as a requirement, which is a cost to the artist, but overall a cost savings to the city in the long run. So going forward into not just C and Main, but also all of our projects for the future, we're hoping to have them guided by this kind of market analysis. And so Up next in this project is our information session. This is really intended to inform the community about the project parameters, some things about the public art process, and the timeline for this specific project. This one will be followed by information sessions specifically for the artists. And I'd love to answer questions if you have any.
So
He does.
Gary does.
Yeah, had discussions about this. It does exceed the $30,000 that was originally contemplated, but the Arts Commission has discussed the dissemination of those funds or diffusion of those funds, and you end up with a lot of little projects, or you can put money into a larger project, which is more competitive. There is sufficient appropriation in the budget for this, so when the project comes through, the RFQ comes through, Megan's here to report that that is what the recommendation is, but there is sufficient appropriation. The budget won't need to be opened for this if the council likes the direction that it's going.
Yeah, I'm the liaison with the Arts Commission, and this was discussed and vetted in great detail. And those volunteers on that commission worked quite hard and put a lot into their work and came up with this plan, thought about a lot, and they have an excellent track record, library with its mosaic on the front and things. So I thought this was quite a good idea and inclusive of the elevation of the budget.
Yeah, I think we have plenty of funds in the 1% for art in some sort of capital fund for that where it's accumulated to cover the overrun there, so.
It also is part of our, one of our MCAs about beautification of the entrances and putting some artwork on that otherwise nondescript little triangle there would be a very good thing.
I could talk a little bit about that as well. Staff has been meeting to talk about the city entryway beautification project. I'll report more on it tomorrow night at our strategic planning session, but we're proceeding with identifying and asking for council approval of identification of the next project for that. This area where this piece of artwork will be located is one of the front runners, probably the front runner for that, putting our efforts in that area. So as I said, we'll be talking about it more tomorrow, but it's a good way to have one entrance to the city on the couplet, improve the sidewalks, the streetscape, the plantings, a piece of art. So it should make that end of town a lot more inviting.
It's also a piece of property that we own as opposed to the north entrance.
Precisely.
Nicely phrased.
I like that you're including a market analysis and starting to do that moving forward. I think that's really wise in determining a good budget. So
Thank
nice
you.
work on that.
Yeah, thanks.
Thank you for your presentation.
Yeah, thank you.
The second report on today's agenda is the Sixth Street pedestrian improvements from LSIP.
Mr. Boncher was going to have this one for us, but he is an in-demand baseball coach for a couple youth teams and had to go do some coaching, so I'm going to step in for him on this one. The LSIP project was slated to move forward this year. It's the LTAC, the Local Highway Technical Advisory Committee, that processes these bids through. They had a bid opening on April 2nd, and we received the bid totals from them on April 4th. The engineer's estimate for the project was $107,941.11. They had a single responsive bidder, and the single responsive bid was $189,080.50. In looking at this, it's highly unlikely that the ITD board was going to approve a project with that big a discrepancy between the estimate and where the cost came in. The costs were much higher than what we've seen in the area for similar work. So in looking at our options, we think there were a few reasons why that happened, some of them being some misconceptions about who would be managing the project and some of the costs that can be incurred based on that, and just the way the project would be run. and then also the scope of the project. It's a smaller project. So staff came up with 3 alternatives for how we move forward. Ultimately, and I can go into any amount of detail that you'd like, but the recommendation that came through our office was that we combine this project with the LSIP project slated for 2021 on 3rd Street. LTAC also supported that alternative. What it does is it allows us to add some scope to that project, which will likely help with the cost of both projects. It'll be clear within that one where the management of the project happens, and we think we'll get a lot more competitive bids. This project was a relatively small project. It included, so it's on 6th Street, so it's Asbury, Almond, Jackson, Washington, the Alley, and Jefferson. So there are 13 ped ramps, and then adding thermoplastic stop bars, and then there were 3 bulb outs. And so a relatively small in scope project. The delay of this project, there isn't any really pressing infrastructure need as far as like a safety concern or anything. This is just an improvement of that corridor. And so we think that the most advantageous thing for the city was to wait on this and combine it with the 3rd Street project. There was a letter that was drafted by City Supervisor Gary Reedner. On April 19th, it went down to the Idaho Transportation Department, indicating that from the staff perspective that we concurred with that idea of rejecting bids and then moving forward with option 3, which would be the rebid with 3rd Street. Gary, I don't know if this.
Yeah, I discussed this with the mayor, or the options, one of the options was to just rebid the project this year. That if that was going to happen, the ITD board needed to know that last Thursday. That was not an option that we thought that we could go with, mainly because if it was rebid, chances are ITD would say, you know what, if it does come in high, we'll be looking to the locals to make up the difference. As Tyler said, it wasn't a project, it's an improvement. It's definitely something we want to do, but it isn't anything that is critical at this point. So a delay of a couple of construction seasons, actually one total construction season, won't adversely affect it that much. We couldn't get them an answer saying rebid it in that period of time. The second option was to combine it with the A Street project, which would have cost us additional monies in order to prep the project, some engineering, some things that needed to be done, which would have increased significantly the cost of match. There will be a little bit of increase in this, I think about $4,000 of additional cost to roll it in with the 3rd Street LSIP. So in advance of that, and they wanted an answer Friday, I met with the mayor. That letter went out this morning. So we have directed them that we want to combine it with 3rd Street, mainly because from the options given us, we just didn't have a heck of a lot of choice. So we'll be coming to council asking for ratification of that action on the 6th. But we are ready to go, and it appears, LTAC's recommendation was to do this. It seems to make sense to staff at this time. And the mayor was on board with the letter.
The $4,000 additional charge to combine those is way less than the difference between the estimate and the bid, so I think it's probably well worth the investment there. There's some other things that might play into this, like the Hello Walk construction may have some effect on how important this is. If that was to be constructed, that would be another alternative pedestrian pathway in that corridor, and also, I don't know about the disaster fund thing that might happen from the flooding. If anything was,
I wouldn't see anything in this corridor related to that.
That's more on the other end of the street,
Yeah, the only pedestrian issue with the flooding was the fact that intersections were flooded because of the storm system.
Right.
That didn't cause any degradation. Yeah, okay, cool.
Not that we know of.
We know of it this time.
Well, the only exception being that we have Hog Creek there's a vault in Hog Creek's over the sidewalk, and there was one section that a piece of the lid basically lifted up with the flood waters, but that's back in place, and that's something other than that, yeah.
Okay. Also, this might be something more for Bill, but has no impact on the URA ICCU improvements? Okay.
The answer is no.
Okay, you have anything further?
Nothing further on that issue. I did want to give a quick report on the Third Street Bridge. As we promised, we'd come with some report every month. The engineering on the project is complete, the survey work is completed, site staking, utility locates are complete. Retrieval of footings will occur during this week, excavation will start next week, and we'll have the bridge the week of May 6th.
Perfect. Thank you.
Just in time for
When we
spring.
have a specific day, we'll make sure and let everybody know for anyone who wants to come watch the thing get put in place by the crane.
Awesome.
Thanks, Tyler.
Thank you, guys. All right, with that, I'd entertain a motion to adjourn today's meeting.
Entertainment.
Yeah.
Did a bunch of
Thank you all
business today.
for attending.